So, welcome everyone for another episode of Confabulating. Today we have with us Paras Shah. It's a pleasure to have you, Paras. I know it's 2 a.m. now where you are, so thank you so much for doing that for us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Paras has a BA in Fine Arts Psychology Education on the DHA, Degree College for Women, Karachi. She has several trainings, certifications in documentation, conservation, sculpture. She graduates in a course in conservation methods and practices in Italy, paper restoration and conservation in the International Institute of Restoration and Preservation Studies. An academic qualification in arts and heritage management from Bocconi University in Italy. And she is nowadays the director and conservator of the Archives Conservation Laboratories and the general secretary of Radio's Memorial Library as well. So welcome once again, Paras.
Welcome. Hello. Hello.
So I know you have a presentation to share with us, yeah?
Yeah, I'll be talking through my presentation because it's easier to explain in that way. As Joe has already introduced me, my name is Paras. I'll be talking on approaches and techniques for the integration of lacunae in archives and the concept of retouching. The logo of our company that is in Pakistan, bit of a background. The laboratory, it started under the umbrella of Rashti's Memorial Library and Rashti's Heritage Foundation in 2015. We started consolidating, cataloging, conserving, preserving all the material that was part of the library. It houses scores of rare books, maps, photographs, thousands, probably tens of thousands of photographs, negatives, and documents, letters, an exchange of letters between important personalities during the time of the independence of our nation, and which is extremely important for the history of the subcontinent. And we have a team which is internationally trained, and we conserve and digitize the records of the library. Just to give a background, the library consists of materials of Husamuddin Rashti. He was a historian, writer, and research scholar, and a recipient of many national and international awards on literature history. And Ali Muhammad Rashti was a writer, politician, and research scholar, also a recipient of many international and national awards, and played a very pivotal role in the independence of our nation. Just to give a background of importance of historic paper-based collection, paper is a hygroscopic material. It basically absorbs humidity. It consists of fibers, binders, minerals, pigments. So when historic paper, it comes into contact with indigenous factors from the environment, the degradation starts. So this is just a bit of the background that I want to give on the importance of paper, because we'll be talking of the infilling of lacunae and how to retouch lacunae. So it's very important to talk of the historic archives and what we basically do. The photographic and historic paper-based collections are often fragile, and they require work in a controlled environment, which is a critical component of preservation. Exposure to light, fluctuations in temperature, relative humidity, pollutants, all they change the physical and mechanical properties and lead towards the degradation of paper, causing issues like oxidation, flaking, fading, darkening, and due to which the historic paper-based collections and the documents, they become brittle. Therefore, conservation treatments are extremely important for the longevity of the paper. Just to give a background of what lacunae is a generalized term. It's a Latin word. It is used for missing portions and gaps that occur on paper, even on buildings, bindings, ceramics. Any gap that occurs is referred to as a lacunae. In terms of historic archives, we talk of missing portions or gaps and that occur on paper, illuminations, bindings, or any part of the book or the paper. Therefore, restoration of lacunae in books and documents are normally done to consolidate the structure. I hope you all can hear me very
yeah, perfect.
Okay. Yeah, so do you show us the PowerPoint now?
I'm just skipping through the
Okay.
slides. I hope
Okay, thank you. No, it's just
you can see the screen, right?
yes, the screen, yes.
Okay, okay.
But the presentation
So,
is not on, correct?
sorry?
But the presentation is not on, correct? Or is it is on?
I'm just giving a bit of a background of
Yes,
what
yes,
I
yes.
was just to making sure that the presentation was not on, because if it was, we are not seeing it. So yeah, perfect. It was just to confirm.
Okay. You can see the screen, right? Whatever is
Yes,
happening.
yes.
Yeah, the only
Okay.
thing we can see now, it's basically your files on your documents.
Absolutely. So this
Okay,
is just a bit
perfect.
of a background
So
that
you
I'm
match.
giving. Okay. So we were talking about lacunae. Lacunae is basically the missing portions and the gaps in document and historic archives that occur. Before the process of the infilling of lacunae starts, there is a series of processes we follow to consolidate the paper, to offer longevity of the paper, and to save the paper, preserve the paper. So first of all, a detailed analysis of the paper is required because paper has gone through many changes over the centuries. It was introduced by Ceylon in 1st century, and then it went on to the rest of the world, to Arab countries in 8th century AD, and then to European countries in 10th century AD. But the paper making process has gone through variety of change in terms of pulp, in terms of its making process, in terms of inks. So there are different forms of degradation that we need to understand before the conservation of paper. So we need a detailed analysis, which we do with the help of naked eye, as well as different kinds of microscopes that we use in the laboratory to understand what kind of pulp was there, what kind of watermarks were there, what kind of ink was used. Even the details of the fibers and the pigments are noted down during the thorough examination. Therefore, we prepare condition reports. Condition reports are done with the help of lots and lots of drawings and documentation and photographs of the damage on the paper, because in all the cases during conservation of historic archives, we do not want the writing to be lost or the paper to be damaged.
So basically you do a sort of a survey first, right?
Yes, just the steps that lead towards the conservation or the infiltration of lacunae in historic archives, just the steps that we follow. When we get a damaged document in our hand, these are some of the steps. So these are some of the books, historic books and documents from Rashti's library. As you can see here, this was a very rare book from 1846.
Sorry, are you showing the PowerPoint now? Because we are not seeing the PowerPoint.
You're unable to see. Yes, I'm sharing the PowerPoint.
So what I will suggest is, because I think you've been going through the PowerPoints and we've been watching nothing, because we thought that you are just doing the introduction. Just try to do it again. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll just try to share it once again. That's what I was wondering, because I was going through the PowerPoint.
This is why I ask if we are supposed to be watching the PowerPoint.
No, yes,
now we are.
yes.
See it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just start the slideshow once again. Just a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Everything that you've been talking through. Yeah.
It now?
Now makes a little bit more sense.
Okay, that's fine. So these are just some of the historic books and documents that we found from Rashti's library. This book, as you can see, had a lot of damage on it, and there were scores of materials like these with broken tails and ends, missing supports. The stewing is visible, the spine is gone. There are a lot of perforations. You can see where I'm pointing the cursor, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And these are just some of the documents written in Persian and Arabic and English. And they were part of the library, which as you can see, there's a lot of damage. This is particularly because of the insects attack. We were also conducting a kind of a research on the kinds of paper used by tracing the watermarks. Watermark was a kind of a signature that they put on paper that is visible in a particular kind of light. That was a kind of a signature by the paper maker. So we will be trying to consolidate and accumulate the different kinds of watermarks. Through that, we can trace down the history of the document wherever the history is not, where the date is not written. So we were able to find out that the paper that was used in the Islamic countries, it goes through a process of sizing which is done in wheat starch. And the insects, they feed on wheat. So there was more damage of insect or there was an insect attack which is particularly visible in Islamic documents as compared to other documents. So this is just one of the findings that we had to see, we found out during the conservation process. Okay. As you can see here, again, a lot of damage. There's a lot of fungi, mildew, perforations, loss of material. Just some of the books that we found from the library, as you can see here. Metal, that is the biggest disaster for books and paper.
Yeah.
Erosion, yeah.
So when we talk of the approaches and techniques of Lacunae, we basically follow two processes. One is the material restoration, and then comes the presentation. In material restoration, we talk of consolidation of the support, of the surface layer, of cleaning, of treatment of support and surface layers, reassembly of the lacunae and structural infills in cases where the lacunae is totally missing or gone. And then comes the presentation, which we'll be talking of later. Some of the things we remember during conservation of material or historic documents is we keep all the tiny, minutest features of the documents possible to be studied for further study under microscopes. The missing threads, the bands, even the pieces of dirt and dust, they are kept for a thorough examination, and then conservation treatment is suggested further. Again, this is one of the rare books. It was published in London, 1874, the Indus to the Tigris. It was totally damaged, as you can see here. This is, again, in such cases, the pieces of thread, they are kept, the dust is kept, all the missing parts or the of the book, because the books are disbinded and then they go through a process of cleaning and the infilling of lacunae. So you can see here, it's totally gone from here. We collected the dust for microscopic study. So once we do the documentation with the help of lots of photographs and drawings, and we suggest a detailed plan for conservation, the paper or the archives, they go through a process of dry and wet cleaning. Now, it basically depends on the restorer, what kind of a treatment or the cleaning they're supposed to give, because wet cleaning is not suggested for all of the documents, especially in cases where the ink bleeds. So a dry cleaning is, and dry cleaning is also where the paper is extremely brittle, one has to be extremely careful. Dry cleaning of historic documents, it's done with the help of Japanese hair brushes. They're extremely very good because they do not have any metal elements in them. They're made of natural animal hair, and they're soft on the paper. So with the help of Japanese brushes and volcanic rubber, a sharp sponge, tweezers, we try to straighten the corners, the ends. We try to gently clean with the help of cotton balls, the paper, and the dirt is removed for microscopic study. This is just one part of the dry cleaning that the paper goes through before the Japanese paper is laid for lacunae infills. Ink solubility tests are extremely important in cases where the ink does not bleed. A lot of research has been done on the kinds and types of inks used since antiquity, but still we lag behind in some way or the other. So the restorer has to go through lengthy processes of ink solubility tests, which we also call spot tests on different letters or writings on the corner to see if the ink does not bleed, because there are certain inks like carbon, they tend to bleed. So in all cases, we have to save the historic writing and the paper and the material. Therefore, we conduct pH tests and ink solubility tests with help of alcohol and water to see, to stop the ink from bleeding and to see if it doesn't bleed. This is how we prepare for the pH tests and the solubility tests. The plastic sheet or the Melanix and Mylar sheets are laid on them. The spots are identified. on the sheet. No writing is done on the historic document, and only on those spots, if the writing consists of different inks used there, spot treatments are done on all the different letters, only on the corners, and then the pH is tested. The document and the books then go through the process of wet cleaning. Now, wet cleaning is extremely, it's good for books or documents that are heavily damaged with oil, grime stains, wax, earth, water rings, discoloration, foxing, mildew, and other such stains. This is also one of the processes which we have to follow before the Lacunae infills. It is also suitable because there is a kind of a situation which we call foxing. These red spots appear in documents on historic paper. Cold water bath is good for those. And even the mildew, we give it a cold water bath, whereas hot water is good for other stains and dirt removal. So the document goes through wet cleaning and then deacidification. This is also one of the processes, but this is an extremely important process that we follow. It is a kind, like a child is born and then he has to go through a series of vaccinations to prevent him from further illnesses. Deacidification is a kind of a vaccination for paper that is a remedy that helps the damage suffered by cellulose. It saves the document from further damage to the cellulose, because cellulose is the most important ingredient of paper. It goes through a series of damage after coming into contact with endogenous material from the environment and other factors. Therefore, deacidification is extremely important. It is done either by immersion or by spraying. It cleans the document before the Lacunae infills. Also, when acidic paper is exposed to pollution from air, high relative humidity, it becomes brittle over time. Oxidation in paper causes chain scission in cellulose, resulting in change of physical properties, damaging the mechanical properties. Cellulose is actually found in the internal layer of the plant from where the pulp is extracted. It is extremely important because it consists of fibers, oxygen, carbon, sugar, and all the other minerals. The chain of this cellulose, it breaks due to oxidation, which results in the damage of paper over the period of time. So therefore we suggest the remedy of deacidification, because it saves the paper from further breakage of cellulose chain. There are a few factors which are responsible, environmental factors. Then lignin is extremely, it's a component that is responsible for the oxidation, because lignin is found in the external layer of wood. It's responsible for the rigidity and of the plant, but it's extremely damaging when its presence is found in paper pulp. It causes oxidation. And then, of course, oxidation is also a cause of some kinds of inks, for example, iron gall ink. Therefore, the remedy of deacidification is a kind of vaccination for paper is followed. Here, we try to follow it by immersion in the deacidification liquid. And then again, the pH is tested before, during, and after the deacidification. Then there is a process of removal of stains. Stubborn stains from documents are removed. They just do not go with the help of dry and wet cleaning. Therefore, certain chemical treatments have to be done on them with petroleum ether, perchloroethylene, just few of the solutions that we use to remove stubborn wax stains, tape marks, metal marks, these common pins that were attached in historic documents and they leave a mark on them. So these stains have to be removed and cleaned with the help of certain chemicals. And of course, documents which are extremely sensitive, and there is the problem of insolubility. They are put in vacuum chambers and that they are thoroughly cleaned with the help of chemicals to remove the stains. And again, whatever solvent is used for the stain removal, the spot tests have to be done with those chemicals. For the conservation of historic documents, we use Japanese tissues in conservation. Many of the laboratories abroad and even here, they're making their own pulp. We strictly follow using Japanese tissue because it has its own various advantages. It is made of mulberry, bamboo bark, Mitsumata, and Gampi. It has long fibers, and which is in contrast to Western paper, which is less fibrous. Japanese paper is extremely, it's very vital because you can actually, when you tear the paper, you can see the fibers which overlap the document from where the document is damaged during restoration, and they just infiltrate with the fibers of the document. So they are extremely good for used in conservation. Since centuries, Japanese paper makers have remained consistent in producing high quality handmade ideal papers for conservation. So these are just a few of the Japanese papers used, the Tengujo Kashmir, Kozoshi. These are the names of the papers that we use during conservation. Now the process, after the variety of processes of cleaning and the documentation, we come to the main process of reinforcing of lacunae. That means there are varieties of ways in which we fill the lacunae in the historic document in order to provide it some longevity and to save it from further destruction. But to achieve this process, we have to follow the series of processes we just talked about before the reinforcing of lacunae. Reinforcing is basically a concept similar to anastolysis. It is also known in buildings and architecture, historic architecture, ceramics, textiles, where the missing pieces of the original structure or the document, they are kept and they are put in from where they are missing, and then they are reinforced with the help of Japanese tissue. Is laid, a thin layer of Japanese tissue is laid on them so that they just consolidate with each other. So this is just one part of the infiltration of infilling of lacunae that we call reinforcing of lacunae. This we do before the document, the reinforcing is done. The document is sprayed with ethanol and water. Ethanol is actually very important because it helps water to evaporate. It relaxes the paper. You can open up the tears. You can put the missing pieces. And then the Japanese paper is laid with the help of binders and glues. And then the paper is put for flattening and under weights to flatten it. And it's put for drying. This is another method of the infills of lacunae, that is mending and infills. This is applicable on areas where the paper is gone completely. As you can see here where I'm pointing my cursor, these were from the document, the holes that occurred due to the thread and the sewing. There were these perforations on the sides, probably due to recurrent handling of the document. They were covered and infilled with the help of Japanese tissue. But one thing has to be, the restorer has to be very, the Japanese tissue that they use is not of the same thickness of the original document. It has to be thinner than the original document. It should not overlap the writing because the writing is the main part of the document that we save, and it should not cover the writing. So it is put in a way that it should not cover it is thinner and it does not cover the writing. So this is again the second technique of infilling of lacunae, that is amending. In the same way, the paper was relaxed with ethanol and water, and with the help of Japanese tissue and glues, the lacunae were infilled here, like over here. This is the third process, that is lining. Lining is applicable for documents that are extremely damaged and a lot of perforations and a lot of damage. As you can see here, the sides are totally damaged over here. So facing and lining are done where the missing pieces are put next to the, from wherever they're missing, and larger sheets of Japanese paper are laid on them with the help of glue. Again, it's a thinner Japanese paper so that the writing is visible and a complete support is given to them. This is applicable for bigger surfaces like maps and scrolls. Larger pieces of Japanese tissue are put on them. Paper after the treatments are dried and then flattened. Of course, saving the writing is our main priority. Therefore, we use certain glues to put the Japanese paper which do not overlap the writing, and some of the adhesives or the glues that we use. Tylose is very widely used. Finori is seaweed paste that is found in Japan. It is an aged paste, can go on for years and years. And then there is wheat starch paste, starch, Klugel G and E. All these are out of the family of cellulose, because cellulose is the main ingredient of paper. And then kelso gel that is used to clean works of art on paper. Few disadvantages of modern paper. Modern machine-made paper is difficult to restore, as there is a mixture of pulp and involves a process during manufacturing which renders its quality. As I said, I previously noted that paper has gone through a variety of changes, and the pulp has gone through a variety of changes over the centuries since its inception. And original paper, handmade paper, was far more better than what modern machine-made paper is made nowadays, or even many years back. Also, there is a process of soda pulp which goes through bleaching. The wood pulp, which is used in machine-made paper or the modern paper, it has a presence of lignin, which impregnates the fibers and the cellulose, and which is very damaging for paper. So, of course, these are some of the disadvantages of modern paper. And of course, when we have during restoration, we have the problems of saving the ink, because there are certain inks that tend to bleed, like carbon inks, and then there are certain inks that create a lot of perforations and damages, like iron gall inks that were used because it consists of metal salts. Iron gall ink consists of metal salts, and and vitriol, that are like small tiny pieces of glass, and that is left behind on the paper, which perforates and causes a lot of oxidation. It causes loss of material from where the iron gall ink was put on the paper. So we have to save the paper and the ink at all costs. Just some of the examples of restoration that we conducted. This is an example of migration of acidity from ink. As you can see, this is iron gall ink, and it creates a lot of perforation and the acidity. This is the recto and the verso. The acidity is visible on the verso of the paper as well. A few of the case studies of restoration. This is the original document that we found, and then it went through a process of dry dirt was saved. Again, wet cleaning. It was disbinded, and the quires were separately wet cleaned. Again, the infilling of lacunae here, and they were put under weights and they were flattened. And this is the after result. Now, there are certain stains, for example, the oil and water stains from here, they just do not go, but they do become better after thorough cleaning and the disinfection with the deacidification liquid. But there are certain stains which are just difficult to remove. These are oil stains that were on the document. Again, another case study. This is the lining of the document. It was completely damaged from here. It was completely lined with a thicker Japanese paper to provide longevity. Some of the quires were so damaged that it had to be faced in sizing. Sizing was done with a larger piece of Japanese tissue before its presentation. Okay, so this was just the first part of the presentation. That was the infills of the lacunae. Once the restoration process is complete, we talk of the presentation, that is the illuminations and illustration. Once the lacunae is infilled, we seldom talk of retouching in documents. It's not done. Retouching, especially of writing, is not done in historic documents. In all forms and costs, we save the historic writing. Therefore, we do not follow the concept of retouching, only in certain cases, which we'll be talking further. Retouching is strictly avoided, except if the document consists of calligraphies or artwork along with text. In such cases, certain techniques are considered. Text is, however, never retouched and kept in its original form. Scholars can note the missing text if any separate publication, or can speculate the original content of material if known, and apply retouching only to the areas where the restorer is sure of. where they will enhance the legibility of artwork. Also, documents that contain illuminations or calligraphic art along with writing are sometimes retouched in cases of small or large lacunae. So this is just the part of presentation, how we tend to present the lacunae that we have infilled in the document of the historic or the historic paper, how we want to make it look presentable. Some of the retouching techniques that are done on works of art, that is, one of them is control of tonality. This is extremely effective for small and large lacunae, for the holes, small and larger holes that we call lacunae. Also, it does not involve the creation of new images, which is strictly avoided. This is done in Dome of Siena Crypt Flight to Egypt. Just some of the techniques that is followed for artwork, we do the same for paper, which consists of writing along with drawings and calligraphy. Again, few of the other techniques. One of them is lowering of tonality. Here we lower the tonality of the Japanese tissue or the paper or the pulp we lay on the historic document so that it enhances the beauty of the rest of the object. Again, another technique is monochromatic, that is controlling the colors with one flat color. As you can see here, this is the monochromatic technique that we have followed. Chromatic is done with the help of different colors, and chromatic abstraction is done with the help of texture. For the proper presentation of the document, here it's in Piero della Francesca, Battle of Constantine and Maxentius Arezzo. They've followed the monochromatic technique of tonal modulation. These are the infills, and they've given it one flat color, which enhances the rest of the beauty of the object. It does not create a separate object. Depending on the artwork of the above technique one of the above techniques is selected. Also during restoration, these illuminations, it should be kept in mind not to retouch areas where the contents are not predictable. The scholars can speculate. It is also important to have a proper visual and historical psychological balance between the retouched and the original material, not to overlap the objects of history in a document or to hinder its aesthetical image. Some of the exceptions that we follow when we talk of historic paper archives, not of drawings, not of buildings, not of just historic paper archives, retouching is only done in cases where the book contains illuminations, calligraphic art or original art, where the book is considered a high examples of graphic art, or they are sacred books because they maintain the functionality in religious rituals. In these cases, we follow the concept of retouching. Otherwise, we do not hinder the original writing of the historic document. This is Hypnerotomachia Polyphily in 1499. It is considered as one of the most beautiful examples of graphic art ever printed. In cases of damage, probably retouching here would have been considered because it consists of writing along with the graphic art. That is Codex Sinaiticus. It is, of course, a religious book. So if in case of damage, retouching here would have been allowed to continue for religious rituals. The Torah scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls and papyrus. Of course, you can see the damage here. The writing is lost. And for the religious continuity and functionality, probably restorers would follow a retouching to allow a continuity in the text if something is predicted or known. These are some of the Gandharan Buddhist texts. They are on birch bark, and the oldest Quran that is in Birmingham University, it's made on parchment. Now here they've infilled with the help of lacunae, with the help of Japanese tissue, but the writing is missing. They have not retouched and just kept in its original form, the way it is. This is an example of flaking of writing, so probably retouching would have been considered here if it was termed necessary. These are, of course, the case studies that we, the restoration and the retouching on books that we followed. As you can see here, the spine is totally, it's damaged. It has perforations here. The spine is made of alum todd material. Here, the book cover is made of cardboard. We followed the presentation technique of retouching here on this. It has a marbling effect. You can see a lot of dirt here, humidity, discoloration, even the inside, the humidity is present, discoloration, loss of material, weakening, lines, tears. So this is the after result. We applied the chromatic technique of tonal modulation. We gave it a marbling effect because it did not have any writing on it, but this was a historic book from 1846, just to make it look presentable. And of course, here as you can see here, it's missing. And here the lacunae is infilled. And then with one very milder watercolor, it was filled to just give it a presentable look. These things are good for presentation. This is during treatment, and this is after the treatment, the final result that we did with the marbling technique. Digitalizing is very important. Of course, it prevents recurrent handling of the document, and it is a very pivotal part of the restoration process, because you digitize archive material in order to conserve the archival document. It is a good practice, inexpensive. It creates multiple records for unique documents, and it saves the material from recurrent handling. We take pictures, we digitalize with the help of many softwares, and we keep the record for future study. These are just above some of the processes of paper restoration and proper presentation. And of course, this is how we digitize with the help of cameras. And then there are high-level scanners these days, and which allow digitizing. Of course, the restorer or the conservator, they have to decide what they want to do. They have to create detailed plans for conservation, and they have to ask themselves basically whether the cultural object they have to do anything with it, if it damages more, or just leave it untouched. Careful evaluation is extremely important. They have to ask themselves if restoration is desirable or only conservation is to be allowed, if the present condition of the document is accelerating further deterioration of the object, or the object is disfigured, or do they have human, technological, and financial resources before starting the restoration process. And of course, at the end, a proper environment is extremely important for safe handling and proper storage of the historic documents, where the relative humidity is controlled, the temperature is controlled, there is proper handling of the documents, and for further study and future study, only the digitized parts that were, the documents that were digitized, they be referred to for research purposes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paras. Very interesting. And we have questions already for you from people who is watching us. So one question is from João Sequeira. He basically asks, or he says, I have a question which I guess the answer is obvious, but is the process of book restoration reversible? So, because what happens when a restoration goes wrong and you need to undo what you have done? It's reversible?
Not in all the cases, it's not reversible. Therefore, we carefully plan each step before the restoration of the document. That is why we follow certain steps like ink solubility tests and pH levels. We decide whether it has to go through dry cleaning, or the document is so damaged that it is not, we cannot allow wet cleaning. So in cases where you think that the document, the restoration cannot be reversed back, it is always like I said, it's okay to leave the document the way it is, study properly, and to see what kind of a treatment that you will be applying on the document. So reversibility is extremely difficult in certain cases. So I would, of course, it's difficult, yeah.
Have a careful planning, probably.
Yes. Yeah. Can I just ask one question? What I want to ask you is because different times in history brings us also different kinds of papers that are used. The paper is also object of was submitted. I'm sorry, to changes. I mean, it started with a papyrus, and then other processes came. So when you look at the paper that you, or the book, or that you want to restore, when you think, when you say about the planning, you have to be very careful with the material that you are using, right? Also, because I saw that you carefully save even the dust, the threads, everything that is part of the history of that document, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the processes can be different if we have different kinds of paper, different kinds. And I also have seen that, for instance, the religious papers, the option is not to restore it or not to rewrite it, because you would obviously change something that was written for a certain ritual, right? So the approach is different.
The approach for all the historic paper is different in terms of the infiltration of lacunae, or you're trying to ask for the cleaning or some other process of the restoration, or the overall restoration you're talking about?
I'm speaking about all the restoration. I mean, when we speak about the restoration of a book, when we saw it in religious books, for instance, the purpose is to maintain, the main purpose is to maintain the original. Yes, because it has a meaning. It's a religious and rituals that are associated with that paper. But I mean, it also has, they are different. I mean, their characteristics, they are also different. How do you, when you plan to restore it, is all that, you look at all that? Yes. What is the approach? It's first, because when you say you have to choose if you are going to restore it or not, am I going to damage it more than it is? So what is basically the main focus that a conservator has?
Therefore, we conduct a detailed and a very thorough study before the restoration process starts. We get into the details of paper. There are many technologies so advanced. We have various machines which gets inside the fibers and which identifies the kind of pulp used for paper, and then we can devise a restoration process. But mostly historic and paper archives, they follow through these the processes that we talked of. They go through these processes. It is up to the restorer to decide which process is going to pick and choose. For instance, the paper is extremely brittle, but it has many stain marks on it, right? So he has to devise a chemical treatment on it very carefully. Each and every spot is cleaned with the help of cotton swab. And then the paper, which is extremely brittle, goes through a cleaning in a vacuum chamber, or which goes through lengthy cleaning. So it is totally upon the restorer what kind of a treatment he devises. But before the treatment is devised, he actually has to get into the details. Now we can even identify the kind of pigments and the colors and the kind of material that were used for not only for making pulp, but also for making the pigments and the inks. There are different machines like X-ray fluorescence, XRF spectra. They can even identify the color properties in detail, which are there on the artwork or the paper. So a thorough analysis is, of course, extremely important before the restoration process is devised.
Yes.
And when, for example, you said in the beginning, when you take and you conserve all of the dust to analyze on the microscope, what type of info are you looking for, or what info can that dust give to you?
We give it a thorough study under the microscope. We see it has insect residues in it, the kind of dust there is there. It actually tells us a lot of, gives us information beforehand, the kind of damage that the document has suffered. That particular, also like one of the pictures I showed you, the thread we had saved that piece of thread, we can understand the kind of sewing that was conducted on the book or the document, whether it was on a 2-on sewing or a single sewing, or whether it was a cross stitch, or what kind of a sewing there was. So all these, saving these small particles or the functions of the books, they give us a lot of knowledge on the history of the document, as well as the kind of damage that has incurred upon it. Therefore, we try to save it.
Okay. And for example, when on the process of cleaning, let's take wet cleaning as an example. You obviously you need to do, well, probably not obviously, but you need to do that page by page. Do you need to deassemble the book and then assemble again? Or there is a way that you can use the whole book? Or
no, it has to be disbinded. The books and the quires, the pages have to be disbinded. They go through during wet cleaning, deacidification, and then they are binded again, once again. Or sometimes in museum exhibitions, it's preferred just to leave it like that. So the quires are open for presentation. Otherwise, if it's preferred, we can just disbind it again, following the similar, the stitching processes, because we study in detail before, when we get a historic document, a lot of time is invested to study into detail, trying to understand the different processes it has gone through in order to follow those again after the restoration processes. So yes, it's binded again.
What is the oldest document that you've ever handled?
That was one of 1620. The date was 1620. And it had a lot of oxidation from ink. And it was a letter that was written to one of the community guards for the person writing the letter. They were asking for rifles for the security of the community. That was, the date was 1620 that we had conserved. Yeah.
Was it difficult to understand? Because then we have also the techniques to identify the letters, the type of writing, it's also different. So you have to study all that, right?
Yes, yes. And a lot of research has been conducted, like I said previously, on inks, but still there is identification of inks is the most difficult part. Even though we have many different technologies, we have machines, but still we have to have enough knowledge each and every ink to see, because one document may contain different kinds of inks, with pencils, iron gall inks, carbon inks, and then it becomes a real difficulty for us what kind of a treatment to advise for that particular document. So we have to study the document in detail, see what kind of inks were used. And of course, it's a difficult process because research is still going on inks, but it's just the knowledge that we have that helps us to devise a plan for that.
Yes, because with the inks, also the way they produce those inks were different, and also the damage also changes its characteristics, right? It changes so that's why you study, for instance, the type of dust and the type of damages that so that you can combine the things, right?
Absolutely. A lot of beforehand knowledge is absolutely important for devising a conservation strategy for the papers and documents. And I also, I don't know about, there is a lot of knowledge and research, but unfortunately in our country, I on forums, I still call this field as a stepchild of the family of conservation, because this is like the least talked about field in our country, especially due to which various records, government records which are extremely important to the history of our nation have totally, they're damaged due to utter negligence, lack of ownership, and of course, lack of resources and material. So of course, we are trying to create a lot of awareness to try to save the historic documents. At least people who are in hold of such documents, they consult us. and we devise proper strategies and plans for them, because we do value history and these documents a lot.
We have another question from João again. So he says, Xylophagus agents that attack papers and books are the same that attack wood?
Sorry, come again?
Xylophagus agents that attack paper and books are the same that attack wood?
That attack wood?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. There are more than 70 different species, and every species has, again, more than hundreds of different species that have been identified that are damaging for library and historic and archival material. And of course, there is a presence of lignin and contents of wood in paper that the materials or these factors basically feed on. So yes, they are damaging.
And having in question that you need to obviously analyze the book, you need to make sure which type of paper it's the book made of, the type of ink. What would you say is the biggest difficulty for you in terms of conservation of the books?
The identification of inks, I would say, because I was just going through a document, it was in Persian, and believe it or not, it had like more than 7 to 8 different kinds of inks used on it, and it was extremely brittle and tearing. It was crumbling just in my hands, and I had to be extremely careful, and I was just holding my head and to try to understand what kind of a strategy I'm going to devise on them. So the identification of inks is probably one of the major difficulty, the phase of difficulty that we face during restoration. Yeah.
Would you say that deacidification is recommended for basically all type of papers, or
yeah.
It's a vaccine. It's a vaccine.
It's a kind of a vaccine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it's recommended, but again, the papers where the ink tends to bleed, like carbon ink, the deacidification chemical is mixed with alcohol and then sprayed on the paper so that it does not let the ink bleed. So we have to be careful what kind of a strategy we are devising, even for deacidification.
And now I have a question that's a little bit tricky, because the thing is that we see a lot of, and we see on history document, not only artifacts, but also documents, books, that smuggling and this kind of black market of documents, black market, it exists. So
yeah,
how can libraries or how can we save these documents from being from all these attacks?
That is one of the problems that I think it's overall everywhere in the world, but we are riddled by this problem more, I guess, in third world countries. I guess the answer to this would be, of course, a lot of awareness and a lot of ownership among the people, a love of their heritage and history. Till the time they do not have the feeling that they own the material, these kind of loopholes in society, they will remain. There needs to be a sense of ownership among the people to protect all this.
Yes,
because
yes,
yeah, correct. It was just in the newspapers yesterday that even from the British Library, some of the materials were stolen. They were trying to find out since a year, and then now they've come to the point that yes, these materials have actually been stolen. So they're looking for the thieves. So it can happen anyway. But of course, I believe that we need to create a lot of sense of ownership among our people. That is the only way out, of course.
Because I've seen, it was maybe a month ago, a very rare Quran. It was sold in Christie's, the big, one of the biggest. I don't know what it's the name of, but it was very expensive, and the origin of it was still being questioned, because it was a beautiful book. It was a really, really beautiful book. And it was very well conserved, So when we think about this and all these books and the work that you make to preserve it, and then to be, you know, to be taken away from that, and to be, that's that's really sad. That's why I'm.
And then we have another problem in our country where, apart from smuggling, there is a lot of damage of material. Like there was a damage to the Gandharan Buddhas just a few months back. They were just found out of a dig. This is apart from the documentation. They were actual relics of Buddha, and they were just smashed into pieces because we follow a different religion, and they dated back to antiquity. So some religious extremists, they just put them into pieces. So we have different problems in different areas, basically. So just, you know, again, a sense of ownership and a love for history and heritage. It has to be inculcated among the people to avoid such problems for future.
Yes, you're right.
Paras, when you are using some software to digitalize the papers, do you use any software as well to do some transcripts, or not at all?
We use one of the softwares which is very easy to use that we are nowadays using. But again, we use different kinds of scanners, different machines, different lenses of the cameras are used because we were conserving diaries which have the minutest writing in them. The regular camera lens does not capture, but usually we use one software that is Digicam Control, which we use to digitize the material. It is easy to use. It stores with the help of numbers and catalogs, and then it just becomes a lot of, you know, hassle-free for us at the moment.
And as a last question, because I want you to go and sleep, please. What is the best way to store, for example, an old book in just a common home?
That's a good question, actually.
And I'm asking that because I have some. And one of them, it's basically, it's from 16th century and it's falling apart. So I have it in a plastic bag because someone said in a plastic bag to help it to maintain the out of humidity. But still, I would like to know what is the best way, or what can we do in our homes?
The material that you should be looking for is acid-free, lignin-free, 100% cellulose. We have these acid-free boxes for archival material, which we create on demand according to the size of the document and the book. We store the documents and the books in those. And then there are certain kinds of sheets like Melanix and Mylar sheets. They are good for the photographs as well as the documents. They do not damage the documents. So I think you should be looking for 100% acid-free, lignin-free, 100% cellulose boxes. You will get a lot of variety from in UK because I get my material imported from there as well. So you should be looking for those. You can get proper boxes, acid-free boxes, and just store the material in them.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Paras. Thank you so much for all of this information, and thank you for staying so late for us.
Yes.
It was a pleasure being with you all. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I hope I did not just put anybody to sleep with my boring presentation.
No.
No.
Not at all. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.